this is the bed. These are the two plants that have to go. They're precisely placed in the wrong place. You know, this one here is actually the worst because the sun's coming up over there and we want that morning sun. This one's not as bad because it's giving protection from the hot afternoon sun. And if we don't cut it down during the winter, it'll be a windbreak, and that'll be nice, you know. But the odds are good that even though if I leave it up and tell everybody I want it up, somebody's going to come through in a cleanup mode and cut it down. That's just, you know, people can't help themselves. They got to clean up the garden, you know. Even though those stalks are a great place for, you know, they're kind of hollow, so it's a great place for insects to overwinter, and that's a good thing. Anyway, this was a bed. These beds are all really great. We've done a lot of good stuff on these beds, and it was fun. We had a Israeli scientist here, and she was looking at the soils in the garden and, you know, going, so do you have a thing I can, you know, benchmark here? Can I check and see, like, if you just had this soil or if you made it? And I said, well, just dig right outside the garden. And if you do that, you got really loose soil here with lots of porosity. And then here, it's like just compacted, you know, clay soil. So she'd go, wow, that's really good. Not good enough for herbs. You know, it's not Mediterranean soil. Even though this is the top of the garden and it's going to drain well, which would be better, you know, when we walk and look at what I tried to grow, we'll see that the few plants that did survive were all at the higher end of where I was planting. And so this is going to be even better because of that, but not good enough if the weather stays like this. We're going to take losses and maybe devastating losses. So went along the creek, found a place where the creek was depositing some pretty wonderful stuff for this, right? Sand and gravel. And got a couple wheelbarrow loads, you know, got down there in the creek, shoveled it up into the tractor, brought it over, wheeled it over, and we spread it out. It's about that thick when we started, but then I've been forking it in. And I left it for you all to get a feel for that. I'll show you. So I just kind of went down. I don't try and turn it. I just kind of open it up and let the gravel fall down in a little bit. It's not very hard work at all. Just want some of it to drop down in, but some of it to stay on top. And that just kind of increases our odds that we'll have good drainage. I brought rock dust that we're going to make a planting mix with, but then I'll take some of that and add it to this, and we'll even top this off where you see the dirt. I don't want to see much dirt. I want to see rock and gravel. You know, I want the plants to have their crowns in the dry. I want the sun to hit that and for it to be dry.
Is there a place around here that we would go to get something like this that's accessible for us?
But I would just go by road bond, tell you the truth. You know, road bond from the Vulcan quarry. That'd be good. I was going to do that. If I couldn't find a place along the creek to get this, I would have just gone to the quarry and bought, you know, it's called road bond. It's like the fine gravel with the gravel with the fines. So you'd have that kind of aggregate, you know, and then maybe I'd buy some sand, you know, go to one of the concrete places and get some sand. You could also get gravel and sand from them, but to me, road bond would probably be the quickest, easiest way to go. And I think it would work about the same. I like that this is more of a mix, more aggregate, you know.
Is that otherwise known as crush and run?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I think probably is. I know it is road bond, but crush and run, yeah, it's the gravel with the fines in it, you know. And by the way, if you get that, you don't want to walk on it, right? Because it's designed to pack, you know. You're not trying to do that. You want it to be loose, so, you know, it drains. You don't want your plants to be struggling. So you just learn, you shouldn't be walking on your beds anyways because you don't want to compact them. But you really wouldn't want to walk on that, you know. And this would possibly have a similar thing. This is similar, but this doesn't have the angles. It's all rounded, so it's not going to pack as easy, you know. So that's it. It's not hard. Anybody that wants to try it while we're talking, you know, you want to pay attention. You want some of it to be dropping in, but you don't have to obsess on it, right? It's not like, oh my God, I didn't get enough to drop in. Go down, you know, roughly 70% of the depth of the fork. Roll it around. Years ago, I would have said go as deep as you can, but I trust the herbs to find their own way down. We don't need as much disturbance as I used to think we did. So anybody want to give that a try while we're talking? The next piece is, what are we going to plant? We have way more plants. Can people kind of put all the plants like right here so we can look at them again and talk about what we want to put in? Some, I purposely left a little area there that just has rock dust and not gravel. And that's where I'm going to put things like chives, basil. No, actually basil I want the drainage, but it won't matter, I'm afraid. But chives, turmeric, the salad burnet. You know, those are ones that I don't know that a key factor is the heat and the drainage. The stevia seems to do fine, so I put that on the edge. And by the way, I didn't talk about the fact that the stevia, the basil, the epazote, which we're not even going to plant, all of those guys are annuals. And so they're not going to come back next year anyways. But getting them to live through this year is getting to be more and more of a challenge too. So we'll just look at those. And the flat, does somebody have the whole flat of herbs?
I think complex.
Oh, okay. All right.
Patrick, so if you had clay, like good old red clay, you would dig that up and add some of this.
Yeah, I would probably first add
some
some
organic.
I'd probably first add a fair amount of compost to it, because that'll help the clay to drain. And I don't know that I'd probably just kind of top dress and do what we're doing here. Once you've made it pretty loose, the ideal, which I'd say, there's a few folks here I could see that might still want to do double digging, but my days of double digging are past, you know. I call that like pathway to sciatica, you know. My joke always was hire a teenager, you know. But double digging, I'd say, you know, for this thing, if you have heavy clay, even though I'm not much into that anymore, I mean, the ideal thing instead of double digging, be to take more time and grow oilseed radish and other deep-rooted plants, and then kill them by mulching, and then grow another deep-rooted plants like Sudex, you know, and take a year of cover cropping, and then you wouldn't have to do that, you know. And every time you knock those down, incorporate more compost on top, you know, and rock dust and stuff that gets the soil life going so that they loosen your soil for you. That'd be ideal, you know, but that's a pretty ideal world.
Covers were radish.
Oilseed radish like daikon. You know what daikon looks like? You know, they're like this long, and they can be, we've had ones in the greenhouse get that big. That's plowing the soil for you, you know. Then Sudex is a cross between, and now I'm doing a cover crop class, but they all go together. You can't separate them, right? Sudex is a cross between sorghum and Sudan grass, a relative of Johnson grass, by the way. You all know how vigorous that is, right? But it dies in the winter, so you don't have to worry about it. And so it will grow 6 feet tall, and you can cut it down, and it'll grow 6 feet tall again. But by cutting it, when you cut it, the first thing it does is go, I got to start over, so it goes down more. So it's going down deep, you know, and that deep going down, and all those cover crops, they can open that soil up for you. So that's the ideal way to do it, you know. I'd still put some some compost on the, if it's just pure clay, I'd work some compost in the top inch or two just to help these cover crops, all of which like a little bit of fertility, to do best, you know. So, and much as I don't want to disturb the soil, sometimes to get started, you got to do a little bit, you know. If you're starting with grasses that are hard to kill, sometimes you have no choice unless you're willing to give it another year, just totally smothering and killing the grasses. The ideal is to develop that ethic and to be thinking way out ahead. So, you know, you can do this much the next couple of years, and over there, that's where you put down your cardboard and all of your organic matter gets piled up, you know. And then when you're ready to garden there, you've already gotten rid of all your weeds, you know, and maybe a year before you're ready to garden, you plant those cover crops. And if you've been putting all the organic matter down, you won't need to work the compost in. The worms would have been going up there, pulling it down in. And then, so if you have a 5-year plan, you don't need to till to put an herb garden in. But most of us don't have 5-year plans for our herb gardens, you know. I don't know, a lot of people have 5-year plans for a lot of things, you know. In fact, some people think it's optimistic to plan for 5 years. Anyway, yeah, that's how we're doing it. There's a little more digging to do right here. And then, kind of what I would lean towards putting in would be a mix of the classic Mediterraneans, the oregano, the thyme, the basil, the rosemary, the sage, you know, and I'd probably put those all kind of right down the middle. You know, I read someplace that sage appreciates not getting hit by the afternoon sun, so I might put it right after the stevia. The stevia, which I know can take some shade, is what I put right close to the cup plant, you know. And then maybe I would put the sage. But I'm kind of open to people, you know, you want to, you know, I didn't talk about it, but we have dill here. And if it gets in the ground, it might do better. You know, it's clearly it was already going to seed and they cut the seed head off, you know. Well, maybe not, I take that back, but it's getting close, it's shooting up, it wants to go to seed. But if I get it in, and I'll give this a little bit more of the good stuff, because it can use, you know, it's going to be a quick annual. And so that kind of thing I'd probably put on the edges, the less permanent ones, you know.
Where do you plant the turmeric and the ginger?
Okay, the ginger we don't even have out here because ours are all too big to put out. But the turmeric, actually that'd be fine to put on an edge towards the back so that it's also getting protected from the afternoon sun. You know, that, I think I even said that already. It'll be like right back there so that it's, you know, as soon as it starts to lose that afternoon sun, which I'm going to guess is going to be something like 2 o'clock where the sun will probably be, you know, which isn't ideal, but, pardon?
Is that good?
Yeah, I think we're great. Yeah. All right. Thank you for doing the yolk person. It looks like maybe right here we got to get it. Like from here to here. I'll just do it as I talk. So, anybody thinking they'd like to see something go in that I haven't talked about? Anybody got a particular interest? And should I go get the lemongrass? Should we separate it and put some lemongrass in? The lemongrass I would not put here. We'd probably weed this poor overrun leek bed and pull some leeks out and put it there. Though actually I set a line, I probably would do more like a zigzag. Put one plant there, one plant there, one plant there kind of thing.
Can you grow these around trees?
Probably not. No, trees take it all up, you know. There's not much room for, if it's a healthy tree, it doesn't want you growing this stuff, you know. I mean, you can keep trying to pile stuff atop, but the roots are going to go up there, you know, and they're going to be taken from it. And some trees are actually going to put out chemicals that just make these things unhappy. And I mean, these guys need sun, you know. Growing around a tree, not really a winner. You could grow them in front of shrubs, and depending on the shrub, if it's a deep-rooted one, it doesn't have a lot of fibrous root that goes out, but a tree, I wouldn't try that, you know. I mean,
Already did. It's too late.
well, tell me how they do.
Well, they're all growing. Oregano and yarrow and mullein.
These trees are how old? Old. Okay. And they're getting enough sun.
I didn't think they were, but apparently they got to have sun.
Early morning is, by the way, the most important sun. So if they don't have other trees in front of them, if they're like one specimen tree and they're getting full early morning, I could see them making it. I think in the end that they won't be happy there because I think the tree is going to be competing for those nutrients and stuff. But yeah, I could see them making it there for a while, you know. And yeah, that's a very good point. Early morning, if you got a choice between any sun, you always want to go for morning sun. You know, as it gets hotter in the day, the plant is stressed by that heat and not as able to photosynthesize. And by the way, a way to keep, we don't have a lot of pest problems on these kind of things, but if you did, a non-toxic way to keep it off that I think would be fine. I don't think they say, it's not even like it has to be registered because it says on the bag you could actually ingest it, is to use something called Surround. Surround is a very fine kaolinite clay, and you spray it on there mostly just to make insects unhappy. It's like they land and because they breathe through their bodies, through holes in their bodies called furacles, they get clogged and they can't breathe. And so if you're in a room that you can't breathe, you're going to leave, right? So they just don't tend to want to feed on those plants. Meanwhile, it turns out that it leaves this white coating, and it's absolutely true. That white coating somewhat interferes with photosynthesis. But what it also does is cool the plant off. And because it cools the plant off, there's actually a gain in photosynthesis. There's a percentage less because of the interference, but there's a couple hours a day more time that the plant can photosynthesize. So you could solve that kind of a problem. You know, if you're having to grow in an afternoon sun, you might actually, if you saw that they were hurting from that, you might actually think about using a little bit of Surround. The problem is that you can eat it, but I don't know how many of us want to eat it, you know. So if it's like basil or rosemary, wash off pretty easy. Trying to get it off of let's say the parsley, I don't know about that, you know. But the parsley is pretty tough. It can grow just about anywhere.
You need to take into account growth pattern in placing them.
Well, yeah, we will take it into somewhat. Yeah, so let's talk about that. The truth is, if that rosemary does well, I'll gladly give half the bed to it. And it'll take half the bed over time. I mean, you know, and I frankly don't think it will, but in a greenhouse, I had a rosemary that was like 15 years old, and it was like that wide, square. It was a square that big, and it was that tall. That'd be a third of the bed. I don't think that's going to happen here, you know. I'm hoping that we'll get, you know, I think if we're successful as far as drainage goes, I think some winter we won't have protected it well enough. It'll be real warm one time, real wet, and then get deeply cold in a hurry, and it'll go out from that, you know. In this climate, I don't tend to think of outdoor rosemaries as permanent. There are exceptions. Can people tell me where they think those exceptions might be?
Higher up.
Not really. No, more likely in cities next to big sidewalks.
I've seen rock gardens and they have
Yeah.
big ones.
And we didn't get to do it because of the weather. But if we had had different weather, we would be doing a totally different thing. We would have prepared. The soil never was, when it was dry enough, we had to plant to catch up with how wet it's been, which is why we're behind on weeding and everything else. But if it had been a different year, we have a retaining wall behind our biochar facility, big cement blocks. We're going to put an herb garden there. Now we have to put a berm above it because there are animals grazing right above there, and we don't want their manure and water to wash down on our culinary herbs. That would not be smart. But we can actually literally just put, take our rotary plow, which will throw up a little hill. We'll put a hill in front of that thing about maybe 4 or 5 feet up above it, and then we'll improve that soil because it's the heavy clay like I was talking about, And we're not on a 5-year plan. We'd be digging it, But we'd mix a lot of rock dust in, a fair amount of compost, and probably some gravel. We'd plant all these kind of herbs along that, and they would do so much better. They'd have that drainage of being at the end of the retaining wall. They'd have protection from some of the wetness that comes across the surface, though they're still going to catch a fair amount of water, so it's not ideal, right? But because it's like a drop-off right there, it's not going to back up. It does keep going. It drops down into the gravel below and then runs towards the pond, and it was designed for that. So probably because of that, mostly because of that mass, but also because of the air drainage and the not terrible drainage, though not ideal because it is at the bottom of a hill. But we probably would do very well with those herbs. I could see rosemary and the thymes and the things like that that have like limited lifespans, normally the tarragons and stuff, lasting for much longer because of that massive amount of rock. And those big block retaining walls, they're way better than a sidewalk, because they're facing the right way and they're gonna get the sun all day, all along on the whole block, and then they're gonna hold that heat. And that's the moderation. It's not that these plants can't freeze, they are hardy. It's those times of the big swings that get them, And then also the fact that they're freezing when their feet are wet, which they don't like, period, And so the combination is what takes them out. Okay, so I think let's do that. Let's do, the classic Mediterranean herbs, with the exception of doing the turmeric there, and then we'll come back and look and see what can we put kind of in between, on the outer edges. And so I did set this up for everybody to plant. Let's talk a little bit about planting. We're going to use those trowels, and we're going to make a little planting mix here. This has already got 2 of the ingredients in the planting mix. Which is the rock dust. So this rock dust, actually, our colleague, John Nielsen, who has a company that makes biochar products, he searched this out. This is basalt, so it's not from around here because we have granite around here, right? But he found a place that's got basalt, and he took this meter developed by this guy named Phil Callahan, who is real into the interaction of electromagnetic and plant growth. And he took that meter and tested to see how paramagnetic this is. In other words, it has a response to the magnetic influence, right? And this particular stuff, at least before somebody took the cover off because they thought it didn't need to be on it because it was just rock dust, had the highest rating it ever seen. It actually was off the meter. And we need to do trials, but we've been using it in great amounts in certain places in particular. We grow squash in the greenhouse. And 2 years ago, people decided, without talking to me, they weren't going to grow it because it just got so diseased they hated to look at it, And so we didn't grow it that year, and then we were planning for the next year. I said, okay, so it gets so diseased, but we put it in April, and we're picking tons of squash until the end of May. And then it gets to look terrible. But that's when nobody else has squash, and we're bringing food to the hungry, and they're getting the squash that they wouldn't be getting otherwise. So I think we just grow it, and when it looks terrible, we pull it out. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's what we should do, And so they planted it, but Jeremy did the planting. Jeremy Greist, he's one of the main growers here at this garden. And he had just seen Dan Kitteridge talking about minerals in one of our workshops. And he had rock dust, not this rock dust actually, but one before that was paramagnetic, but not quite as paramagnetic. And he threw a shovelful to each hole which is a lot of rock dust. I mean, we pay, you know, to ship this. It's not cheap. But I walked into that greenhouse and I'm like, I'm looking at these squash, and how many people here have grown bush squash? You know how when they get older, they kind of just run a little bit? I mean, they're not vining squash, but they run a little bit, right? These things were standing up. They didn't fall over. They were standing up. And also around here, we're really bothered by vine borers. I don't know if people know vine borers, but they really hammer our squash. And if we spray BT and soap twice a week, we can control them. But lots of times we lose track, especially in the greenhouse. We're not thinking of spray in the greenhouse. And they never sprayed this year there, right? Well, come the end of May, the plants were still looking gorgeous, standing tall and producing like crazy. Come the end of July, they were finally starting to look pretty poor. Any place else, the vine borer would have taken them down by then. You know? So I have not done replicated trials, but you know, Darwin figured out the theory of evolution with no replicated trials at all. You know, observation has validity, you know. And my observation is that this stuff does some darn good stuff, you know. And I hope to do some modestly replicated trials. I'm never going to get into the whole scientific rigmarole, but a little bit more comparison I want to do. So we're going to use a lot of that because it possibly has all kinds of good effects. It tends to help plants to kind of reach upward more. But also because it's nice and coarse and going to give good drainage, you know. So, and in here is our normal planting mix, which already had some rock dust in, right? And it's compost, a little bit of azomite, which is another kind of rock dust, but it's high in minerals from volcanic deposits in Utah. A to Z minerals is what it means. And a little bit of alfalfa meal just to give a little bit of energy. We've been learning that we don't need to give nearly as much nitrogen as we used to give, that we do fine with just a little bit, mostly to get the microbial activity going, not to feed the plant, but to feed the microbes that are going to feed the plants. So,
If you already have your plant planted, does it do any good to sprinkle the rock dust?
I would, but I'd mulch it then. And then you can cut the worms. This is grit. Worms have to have grit. They're going to come up and take it in. And then they're going to defecate it out. And so they're going to bring it down for you. It's a slower process, but it'll happen. Yeah.
So do you have an inoculant in there as well, or?
Well, okay, that bag right there, can you hand me that bag? That bag's already in here, and if you look close, you can see the char. Okay, so this is John Nilsson's product. It's his Char Grow Original, and he did trials with this. They were very impressive on yields, early yields in particular with tomatoes at Virginia Tech. Several years of trials, I think 4 or 5 years. So this is like 50% roughly, I don't know exactly, but pretty high amount of charcoal. But then other things, which he has to keep as a proprietary secret because he can't afford to defend it if he tried to patent it. You know, you have to be able to afford a lot of lawyers if you want to defend a patent. And so I can't tell you what else is in here, but it's basically, it functions, how it functioned at Virginia Tech was 2 cups of this stuff to a 5-gallon bucket of potting soil that the tomatoes were then grown on. And when they put it out, and they put it out where Ron Morris ran that program there. He was the person who was doing the research. He was all about cover crops, so he aced the cover crops. You know, he grew great fall cover crops, wonderful winter cover crops. He might have even gotten a spring cover crop in before he incorporated those cover crops with these inoculated by the char grow plants. And that, because all the life that's on this, because there's definitely lots of life on it, it's not just the char and stuff, that then caused these plants to be able to access way more nutrients, grow way faster, and most importantly for tomatoes, come in significantly earlier, which if you're in the tomato business is everything. You know, because once the tomatoes are coming in big time, the price just drops, you know. And as Ron said to John, you know, and John said, you know what that means? He said, yeah, it means being able to pay the mortgage, you know, because you have precocious production.
Are you saying that most char that you buy already has inoculants in it?
Not at all. You have to check out each char, look at it, talk to people, and figure it out. If it doesn't, though, you want to do it, you know. And, you know, the simplest way is just put it in with good compost and let it sit, you know. There's other things you can do, and I'm happy to talk, but we should maybe stay on topic here, you know. Much as I like to go off, the things I like to talk about. Anyway.
Azomite, is that not paramagnetic?
Oh, it probably is a little, but I would expect it to be, you know. Yeah. It's just expensive. I mean, I say that this stuff is expensive. The azomite's a lot more than this, you know. Yeah. This is, you know, the only thing is that nobody's selling this except for John has told me he'd replace what I sold so we can sell it. And I think I figured out 75 cents a pound, but then I looked at it and thought that's probably too much. It's probably 50 cents a pound, you know. You know, which means for a 25-pound bag, it'd be $7.50 or something like that, you know. But you buy a $7.50 bag of Azomite, you tell me where you got it, because I want to go get some, you know. The Azomite's got other properties. I'm not putting it down at all. This is not about nutrients, okay, folks? It's about structure and the paramagnetic effect. Whatever nutrients come off on this is going to be over a very long time. You know, there will be nutrients coming off, but it's going to take, you know, mycorrhizae exuding acids that slowly dissolve the nutrients, and you know, it's not going to happen fast at all. And we don't need it to. It's fine for it to be there. Its impact magnetically is what we're interested in, and then it helps that adds good drainage. You know, so we're going to combine a fair amount of this, and that's kind of extravagant. I would say a bag like this, I forget what he charges, but it's a lot. You know, it's not cheap at all, and it's meant to use pretty modestly. I'm going to use it a little bit less modestly because it's going to be the main source of nutrition here. You know, I'm not giving it much else. I'll give it a little bit of what's there too. And you know, so normally it'd be 2 cups and 5 gallons. I'm going to do something like, you know, 4 times that or 5 times that or 6 times that or something like that. That's a lot of this product, you know. But I particularly want this because there's not that much compost in it relatively. The char will also hold water, but the char also gives structure. You know, so there's place, it'll make, you know, little things won't compact quite against it, so there'll be airspace. Structure's real good, you know. And of course, it's also, you know, harboring the beneficial microbes. And if the beneficial microbes are doing well, they'll actually outcompete and sometimes even eat the bad guys. You know, so the combination is probably worth it. You know, we'll see. As I was reflecting, what can I do that's best practice to overcome an impossible herb year in the mountains? And this is what I came up with, and we'll see how it works. So we're going to take some of this. We're actually going to mix some of the gravel in too, because I want to be sure that there's some gravel in there too. Not as much. There's going to be some already in there. But I want a really loose mix. Like that's way less than I used to put. You know, I'm purposely looking for these plants to have not a lot of nutrition at once and a whole lot of drainage. But what nutrition they get, I want it to be the best, which is why I went with that stuff there. Any questions? Any thoughts? Okay, I think we're probably ready. So for maybe I'll add a little bit more of this to be sure we have the volume we want. And then what I forgot I said we're going to do too is we're going to look for where there's a fair amount of dirt and cover it with more gravel. We don't want to see much dirt. We know it's there, and I'm glad it's there, but and folks, I already kind of said it, but just to reiterate, we're in an extreme situation. You may not have to go this far if you have a better situation. Sounds like Lisa has a better situation where she gets better air drainage, you know. We are at the bottom of everything around us, you know, and that makes it harder. But you can do this to whatever degree you need it, and you can figure it out by planting herbs in just a well-prepared bed. I'm not saying you all have to go home and do this, but if you keep not succeeding, you might move more and more in this direction, you know. If things are doing fine, I wouldn't do all this work. Another thing that'll be interesting to see is with a lot of rock on top, how easy will it be to weed it? Because we're still going to have all the same weeds coming up. And the weeding is critical because we need air circulation, you know. I'm oftentimes not as worried about weeds if they're not competing directly because they're also adding to the soil and, you know, providing flowers that are good for beneficials and stuff. But in a situation where you have disease issues, then you want as few plants in a given airspace as possible, so that more sun and more air can get to it. Tom Trantham, the owner of Seven Springs Dairy, gave a talk one time and he said, best fungicide in the world is sunshine. And that's true. Mold does not like sunshine. Okay, anybody see some dirt that I missed? I guess that spot right there, right? Okay, and so right there, if you'll make a big hole that doesn't get to the fabric, right? You see where the fabric is, right? Yeah. But if you make a hole that incorporates that gravel, we'll put that big parsley right there. And can somebody else go grab the chives? Because we're going to put those two in on these outer edges that don't, that don't have the rock dust. The parsley, we're going to actually give it plenty of this planting mix because it even likes a little more drainage in this kind of weather. And then the turmeric is going to go over there. Are you one of the planters? Okay, good. We're going to have you put the turmeric in.
How do you use that when you're cooking?
Use it very sparingly. It's real strong.
Just the leaves then?
No, you use the root, but you want to be careful until you know what it tastes like because you can overwhelm real easy. It's got some bitterness, but it is what's yellow about curry. It's a critical ingredient in curry, No, even further back, like right on the edge of the gravel. No, not that deep. It needs sun, but more like.
That big a hole?
Yeah, no, a little smaller.
Right here.
Right about there. That's about right. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then so the first plant that we do of the basic Mediterraneans will go right about there. So let's find a basic Mediterranean.
How do you know what's Mediterranean and what isn't?
Well, I list the ones that I could think of, but you can also look them up. And basil's a great one to do, but it's going to be on an edge. These are going to be permanent ones. And actually, we'll probably do the stevia because it can take shade. It's not, I don't know that it's really considered a Mediterranean, but it can take shade and we'll enjoy the drainage a little bit. So we'll do the stevia.
That deep. Okay.
Right there. Yep, that's great. Yeah. Okay, but no, what you're going to do is go a little deeper and you're going to use the planting mix. And you're going to give like maybe 2 or 3 double handfuls, like, scoop it with both hands and work that in a little bit, but mostly you can just like go deep enough and leave some soil out. Put the soil you leave out along the path, between the path and the fabric. Okay. And we'll build the bed up with that. Yeah, yep, yeah. Make a hole and add, for that, just maybe like 2 big handfuls of the planting mix.
Patrick, are there any herbs that you wouldn't companion plant?
Well, some people think of castor bean as an herb. I'd leave that to itself. It's highly poisonous. It's gorgeous. And they think it chases away voles and stuff, And then mugwort. Mugwort's a wonderful herb, but I would only grow it in a pot. I would never put it anywhere in the ground, And I adore it for all kinds of reasons, They use it to season pasta in Japan rather. It's used for moxibustion and acupuncture. You can make pillows out of it and sleep on it and have interesting dreams. It's antiviral, but it's also an incredible thug and will eat your garden, So you want to keep it in a pot, Who was going here? The parsley. Want to hand me that part? Yeah, you might need a bigger hole yet. Yeah, well, now you know, right? But let me weed it for you while I'm talking, okay? Okay, so that's an interesting question here. Do I want to free the roots? A little bit, but I really see people get carried away and they stress their plants. You come in here and totally tear this up, and there's a chance that plant's going to wilt. This is not a severely root-bound plant. So I'd come along and just kind of stop it from going around. I would just come along and free up where it's going around in circles on the bottom. Now, a heavily root-bound plant, you might do that, but then be ready for it to wilt. And that you can do that. You can shade it, be sure to water it carefully and stuff, it'll be okay. But I wouldn't do more than that to that, It's not that root bound, it's actually pretty prime, ready to go in. And does everybody know that when you put a plant in the ground, you want to firm it really, really well? You're doing a plant no favor to be gentle with it, right? When it first goes in, the roots are in shock, and it is not getting water through its root activity. It's getting water through capillary action. And if there are air spaces, there's no capillary action. So you want to really firm very well. When you're done, you want to feel, I'd like put my full hand on and yeah, right, that's fine. That'll do it, yeah. That's actually, it's usually a no-no to walk on a bed, but she's not putting her full weight, but she's firming it thoroughly, and that's critical, Now, we might consider with something like thyme, if we're firming that much, she might have just made a slight depression. We might actually mound the thyme a little bit, so by the time we firm it, it's still slightly above the ground, so it has positive drainage all the way. Speaking of thyme, let's let that be the next one. Which one is this? That's lemon. Let's go with the more immediately culinary. This one's lost its thing. I think that's silver. I'm looking for English, or even that German thyme, which is in the pot that I brought out.
Splitting the turmeric?
No, we're not splitting the turmeric. No, we're going to split the, yeah, English thyme. Let's do English thyme. Yeah. Oh, you know what I didn't do, which we really should do, is get a couple of watering cans and water every plant well. When you're transplanting, these are watered recently. We can get away without doing it. But best practice is to totally water your plants well before you... If you water it well, it's going to slide out completely. So that's going to be a little bit higher up. You know that, right? Yeah. Okay. So then we're going to do English thyme right about where the fertilizer bucket is. Maybe maybe right in front of where the fertilizer bucket is. Yeah, back there. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, all the times I think we want to mound a little bit. Yeah. And then let's look for sage. See, now why am I doing sage next? Because I want it to be out in the open and getting, you know, lots of air circulation, because this is one of our most problematic. We're going to want to mound that a little bit too. And I'm not talking about a hill. I'm talking about just so that the water is flowing away from the stem. You know, just slightly higher than the rest of it, you know. Yeah, and be real generous with that. It's going to like that rocky, sandy kind of effect, you know. Maybe one more. Yeah. And for this, we're going to use even more. I just had her do like 2 nice big trowels full. We'll work about 4 trowels into the area around it, just so it's got loads of drainage. And we'll see how much that impacts it. It may be that all of its problems are airborne, I don't know, but we'll find out. We'll put sage right there. Looks like you made a great hole. That's definitely a $10 hole. Okay. I might pay $12.50 for that hole. All right. You know? Yeah, I'll leave the tag there, sure. Yeah. As long as we got it, we might as well use it. As we finish working there, we can come back, and as long as we think we're allowing good air circulation, we can put something like dill on the edge. But I might actually look at doing the things like dill and other things that get tall only on the backside, so they're not getting away of the full sun coming in this way, you know. So there's a good thing too to think about as much variation in structure as possible, so that absolutely helps with turbulence. You know, if you have, you know, a more even row of stuff, the turbulence is just going to be kind of like up and over and then right there. But if you've got different, you know, different structures and stuff, there's going to be turbulence within it, and you want that air turbulence as much as possible. So instead of putting the rosemary in next, we'll put the oregano in. So if that one's going there, then the oregano will go right about there. I might do lavender next because it looks even more challenged than the rosemary. Though that's specific probably to that plant. Let's go with the rosemary. And why? Because I like rosemary more than lavender for cooking with. I love lavender, but I don't use nearly as much of it, you know. We'll talk about how we use it when we get to the cooking part. But for right now, we'll go with the rosemary next. But really, it's a toss-up. They both really want to be more out here and less losing this morning sun. Just a little bit more of a zigzag so that their roots are a little bit further apart. Yeah, and then work in a mess of this stuff first, and then use this to plant the rest of it, okay? Yeah, I would probably put about 4 of those in. And then this guy will go right about there. Yeah. And then we'll go low again. Now we got a high one with tarragon. That's not tarragon. Here's our tarragon. Which one has the best? So I'm going to be choosing these tarragons. From what I said, can anybody guess which one I'm going to decide not to put in? I'm going to put 2 of them in next to each other to make one nice size clump. But one of them I'm going to choose to keep out. And why do you think that is? Because it has, well, and actually the reason is, and this might be the one, it's got the most shoots coming up, which means that when I go down there and divide it, I got the best chance of getting the greatest number of plants from it, you know? Because if you only have a couple of shoots, you can only, like this one here, I couldn't divide this very much at all. If I'm lucky, I can get 3 plants off of it. This one here, and it's just luck. I mean, luck and skill, which I have some, but if I did it more, I'd have more.
The leaves up when it, so you can.
I will probably take a lot. Well, we're going to probably cook with some of this, yeah. So, it was grown organically, I know that. So we're going to cut off a lot of it and just leave a little bit of leaf at the bottom because we're just, once again, you're disrupting the roots. You disrupt the roots, you want to have proportional disruption to the top, Need a hand with it?
He's holding on tight.
Yeah, if we watered it, it would have been better. But the question about, and see, somebody was on top of this. I don't know if it was me, but they put some gravel in there. That helped, that drainage. But this one's a little more root bound. I might do a little bit more here, but I wouldn't come up and tear the whole thing up, I might, instead of just pulling a few strands off, I might just get the whole bottom part to be I think that'll do it. I think that's going to be fine. Okay. All right. And once again, very generous with that stuff, yeah. Yep. Okay. And then the tarragon, we're going to keep.
With the char in it stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you put that in the hole before you put the plant.
And you mix it into the soil a little bit, but not a lot. You want to, because it's probably 70% rock dust, and that's what we want. We don't want, so if you mix in the soil, that's probably more like 40, 50%. But you want a lot of rock dust just to have positive drainage right away from the crown of the plant,
So are you generous with the rock dust with this one as well?
No, not as generous with that. But you know what? We'll be more generous with this. Why? Because we only made so much, I wanted to go all the way. But this is similar, but it's heavier on the gravel. And actually, it also has more compost in it, and that's going to be good because the parsley is a heavier feeder. It's not that Mediterranean type. It's going to like that nutrition, So now I'd probably do like a big, healthy handful of that stuff, like double handful. Oh, then you're good, yeah. Then mix that all up, mix some soil in it, but keep mixing soil up into it so that you don't have a layer of just soil on top of the gravel. You want to, as you add, get it all mixed up so it's gravelly right up by the bottom of the plant, And so, folks, that's not one parsley, that, right? That's about 4 put in a pot, And what a lot of people would do is just keep that on the deck. You wouldn't need to put it in the ground, But all along that was planned, not for here. The vision was all these plants along that retaining wall, lots of big ones. But as the weather got worse and worse, expectations dropped, Our ambitions dropped, Weather made it less exciting. Once again, you might need help with that too.
I think he can get up.
Okay, yeah.
Butt it up next
Okay, so
Where we tear the bottom out on this one bit.
yeah, I'd loosen that up pretty good. Yeah, that's probably the worst, But you're not trying to get way up into the plant, just loosening it so that they can grow, Yeah. All right, so these two here, we'll do right about there, okay?
that close to
Yeah, they're going to be one clump. That's the idea, yeah. You can, well, thank you for saying that. Leave them one pot's worth apart.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. It's kind of a toss-up. I don't want them too far apart because I don't want to give that much room to just tarragon, But what have I been saying, right? Airflow, not putting things too close together. So it's a combination, You're all doing a great job, by the way. It's looking real good. This parsley, probably we don't even need to put that in. We probably will put the Italian parsley in. These, I'm actually kind of amazed that they died along the edge. I haven't had parsley die as often, But it just was further down, and I forgot just how wet it is down there, Not a lot of herbs have insect problems, but the carrot family does have a problem with carrot rust fly, okay? So if you see lots of your plants that are booming and doing well suddenly start to wilt, and knock on wood, I don't want any of you to ever see that, but we grew at the Highland Lake Inn where I used to work, we would grow 60 foot of a given herb, 4 foot wide by 60 foot. And that was enough parsley that the carrot rust fly found us. And we were just losing the parsley all the time. And the solution was beneficial nematodes, but that's a kind of a tricky thing, and it'd be better off not to have that problem happen to you. How you can avoid it is try not to damage the roots at all to the plant. And if you're going to break off parts like I just did right now, don't break them off in the garden. Break them off a couple days before in the greenhouse, and just try not to, because the smell is going to bring them in, And if you're just growing a little bit, you'll probably never see it, but if you suddenly see your plants wilting, if you dig it up and look and you see that the root kind of looks rusty, there's kind of this rusty reddish look on it, and it's rotty, that's carrot rust fly. And the only solution I know, besides rotation and giving up on those, you would want to completely remove those if you weren't going to try and cure them with nematodes, because you wouldn't want them to live over in your garden. But the nematodes do work. If anybody ever has that problem, give me a call, or first email Lisa and I at lisa@livingwebfarms.org and Pat at livingwebfarms.org and say, I want to be on the radio show. And even if you can't be on at 1:40 in the afternoon on Tuesdays, we can do a private session with you when you can be on, and we'll talk about how to use the beneficial nematodes to cure this. It's not worth going into all the detail right now. Okay, so this one here, we're probably going to do right there. We'll let this, since this did die, we're going to maybe hope that maybe it's a little bit healthier by putting it in the rock. So we'll put that one right there. And chives, we need to find a home for these chives. That one you could definitely do a little bit of freeing up, right? I'd hope to put these in July, and then we had to spend our time planting the plants that we normally plant in the ground, because we didn't get to put anything in May because it rained all the time. Once again, this also gets a fly, the onion maggot, and you smell that? That's not good, because they can smell it. Probably not going to be a problem, but it could be a problem,
The smell. Oh yeah.
No, onion. Totally smells like onion, I'm sure if you were starving, you could figure out how to eat those roots, And they taste like onion, but they probably chew like straw, But that's what blenders are for, right? Then again, if you got a blender, you're probably not going to be starving. So this one is going to take less of that, another shovelful of this stuff, which has more of the compost in it, and then more of the dirt. Your hole's big enough. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, okay. So add a little bit of soil in. Give me that shovel, and once you've done it, I'll give you some of this gravel fertilizer mix here. And I'd mix some dirt into that, and then I'd mix your mix into that too. And then plant away. We're going to do the basil on the back edge. And a little bit in the stone, but not as much. Oh, and what I'm going to do with this, because remember I said that when it's going to seed is when it starts to be more vulnerable. And if you look at this, the way it's kind of making its leaves even closer together, that's the beginning of it going to seed. So can somebody hold this for us? Because we're going to cook with it. We're just going to, and this is how to harvest, right? This one here, actually, this whole branch I'm going to take off because it's diseased. I'm going to take it down to the bottom there. And we won't cook with that part. Once it's got the disease, I don't like to cook with it. But if someone can hold those, I might find some good leaves on there, but any diseased leaves we won't use. We'll use that.
Good enough?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So how do people feel about that? Do you think I should be busting that root ball up more? I know people that they're just not comfortable if they just don't go in there and just tear it all up and get it nice and loose, It's kind of the tough love attitude, I'm more like, as much love of whatever kind of love you need, you know. Doesn't have to be tough all the time. Okay, so let's do, we gotta gamble with this, man. This is the gamble. So this is fun because it's not gonna get big fast, right? And where I wanna put it is gonna be kind of in the center where it gets good drainage. So now what I gotta do is look and say, triage, who do I think I'm most likely to lose here? Or who can most easily be moved if the bay gets in the way? And can anybody guess where I'm gonna put it? If you remember what I've been talking about, which plant here do I have the least faith in it surviving in the bed? So it's gonna go between the sage and the oregano. The oregano should do fine, but it's so tough that I could just easily dig some of it even and move it, you know, just start another patch somewhere, and it'll probably survive no matter what the bay does, you know, if it doesn't get taken out by the rots from all the weather. So it's gonna get, you know, probably one nice big double handful. It's gonna go right about there, okay? Yeah, and then I'll see how long I can keep it alive. This year, what I can probably do is simply put a bucket over it, right? Not even anything else, just a 5-gallon bucket over it through the dead of the winter. You know, maybe on nice days I'll open it up and let it get some light. And it'll probably like not be happy looking in the springtime, but it won't be dead. You know, and if its roots are doing well and all that, it'll probably come back. And if I'm around and the weather's mild, then it'll be open on the mild days. But if I know I got an appointment late in the day or something, then earlier I'm going to cover it, because if it's had that kind of, and I won't even cover it, by the way, until the cold is getting well below 25, because it can take, and I want it to take, plenty of frost. You know, it's not like, you know, it lived through winters that went down to 10. It's just when the winters went down to 1 and 2 that it got killed. And it might have even been that it was not even the 1 and 2, but the fact that it was pretty warm and wet, and then it got brutally cold. One of those, like, you know, Arctic Expresses came in, you know, or whatever they call them. Okay, so who's left? We should put the lemon basil in because it might actually do well. And I don't mean to slight your regular basil. I just, you know, I've had some tough experiences, you know. So why doesn't it go someplace right about back there? Here? Yep. And I'd give it some of the rocky stuff too, just because in this kind of year, everybody's happy to get something, some drainage. And then I want that dill in, just because, frankly, the dill and cilantro, I always want them growing in the garden. And I have to keep growing them because they're always going to seed, but I want the flowers to be feeding the beneficials, and I want to be able to come down and get a little bit of fresh dill or cilantro whenever. And so where's the least harm with the dill? I'd probably put the dill, since it can take some shade, right about there. And it doesn't need much of this at all, but a little bit won't hurt. And there's several varieties of dill, by the way. This one's fern leaf, and I think it's probably similar to bouquet. And those are ones you want to grow if you're looking for leaves. There are other ones that you want to grow if you're looking for seeds, for pickling and stuff. But we more use the leaves, so we go with those. And then let's just sprinkle some of is the flat of cilantro here? Or do we need to go get that? Let's get that flat of cilantro and sprinkle them in and find a place for the sorrel. And I think we'll be done. Oh, we didn't put the lavender in. I think the big one looks not promising enough. Let's put a baby lavender in and see if it can make it all the way, race to the finish. Probably that bigger one right there. Yeah.
That French sorrel is perennial?
That French sorrel is quite perennial, yeah. And pretty bulletproof. It can go maybe between the chives and the, yeah. You know, and then maybe 2 of them there and then 2 past it. And then it'll be a row of that stuff. Which, the nice thing about that is if everything else dies, we'll still have a nice bed of French sorrel. People familiar with that one? Has anybody ever used it? It's quite tart. You wouldn't want to eat it like spinach because it's quite high in oxalic acid. But it's used for sauces for fish. Or like a great spring soup would be leeks and sorrel. You know, make a really nice soup. And you'd use more of it in that situation. Okay, so this guy here, let's put it right about there. Yeah. Yeah, and it's going to get a healthy amount of the rock dust stuff put in there. You know, looks like we're going to be just about right. and have a lot of these herbs in. Is there anything somebody's thinking, yeah, we're gonna take these and we're not gonna worry about we'll take stuff from here and we're just gonna pepper these guys around, not too close, a good foot away from any of the Mediterranean so they still get air, but in any spaces where they can go. Like, so there could be like maybe one there, you know, one here, just like, you know, so that they're about a foot away from any Mediterranean, but, you know, we don't have to worry about them too much because, of course, they're wispy little plants, you know. They're going to be going to seed before they get that big. And you use this for the mix. You don't have to use any of the other stuff, you know. And they'll just have, like, you know, a small handful per plant. And I try and put maybe somewhere between 8 and 12 of those in various spaces along the edges and stuff.
Can I even do it like?
Oh yeah, you can do it. Yeah, if you're a foot away from the other plants, you can do it. You know. We'll find a home for one more of them. Yeah. I think that's silver. This is probably lemon. I think I'm more interested in lemon, tell you the truth. Yeah, lemon. Lemon's more culinary. So the opinions of the chefs are that the best culinary time is the cumin. And frankly, my opinion is the best is a thyme flavor, not the cumin flavor. But I like it. It's fun. We don't have it. And then right after that, it's a toss-up between the regular and the lemon, you know. Does everybody know the lemon? Anybody want to smell or taste? You all know it? Okay, yeah. Okay, so where can we put this? I think we can put this right there. So this is a little close, but we'll be doing triage. We'll probably take some losses. If everything does great, we'll be doing some moving. I'm sorry, what? Oh, if they're not coming out easily, what we're going to do is find us a twig and push them out from the bottom. Right there, that's a perfect twig in your hand, right there. These guys are not as far along as I want, but I want them in the ground. They're very quick to go to seed. There we go.
Have you ever grown cumin pot?
I have, yeah, not in a long time. They say it's real easy. It wasn't real easy for me. And they say it self-seeds regularly. I don't think it ever even, you know, flowered. But I don't know that. I think it was an afterthought. I think it went out late, you know. I started it and I planted the things I knew first. So I probably didn't get it in the ground until early July. And that's probably why I was probably already starting to bolt when I think it probably died before it got. But we used the foliage and it was nice. It was fun.
I was going to say, can you use the seed and the foliage?
Yeah, you definitely can. Yeah. We're aiming for between 8 and 12. Just scattered along on different edges. I mean, it could literally go further out where the sorrel is because it's going to be gone before the sorrel gets big. So you could put, like, you know.
Where are we pointing to start on these edges?
Yeah, I'd put one before the sorrel, one in the middle of the sorrel, and one just between the sorrel and the lemon basil. We purposely don't want to put them all close together because we want that beneficial effect all over the garden. But it's nice when you're cooking to be able to come to one place and get a bunch of it. So we want to have a bunch of it in one place and then scatter them throughout the garden otherwise. And that's what we do with dill too. And parsley. You know, it's like all of those, when they flower, are wonderful for the beneficials. So we want them scattered through the garden, but we also want to have concentrated plantings because you don't want to have to walk through, you know, 4 beds, take 15 minutes to harvest enough stuff for a meal. So you do both.
Growing up here as a kid, though, this would be more normal North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it would be hot in the morning.
And a rainstorm every afternoon. But see, in that weather though, right? Because I got here in the 70s and that's what it's like. There was plenty of sun in the morning and plenty of sun in the afternoon. What we're getting is gray, you know, rain and gray. And that's what gets it. If they get to dry out, they can take it if they have the percolation. You know, our problem too is that a lot of our beds don't have the percolation, you know. But what I can do is go through my files and dig up a nice picture. We actually only have herb plantings. This is the first time we've ever done this much of an herb garden in one place because we farmscape, you know. But I can put pull up some shots and we can put them on the web page, so you can look at it. I'll go through my pictures, probably not for about a week. I got a busy schedule, but then we'll put them up there and you can see what it's looked like when we had better. How many do we have out now? We got to count. Okay, let's do about 2 more and we'll call it quits. There's 1. I said 7, between 8 and 12, so.
And Patrick, one type of cilantro, or there's several?
There's a bunch of different ones, okay. And somebody else, no matter if you listen to any of my talks, you've already heard this joke. But, I recommend cilantro if you're trying to start farmscaping because it goes to seed so fast, right? So if you go, oh, I need flowers, I don't have any, just plant cilantro. And you'll have flowers really fast, right? Now, they do make cilantro that is slower to bolt. And I've grown some of those and I've timed them. They are slower, at least by 45 minutes. I mean, maybe it's a day or 2, but it's hardly, when the conditions are right, boy, it is going to seed. Yeah, they self-seed like crazy. And you can use the seeds for, coriander. There's nothing to not like about it. If you want to have it all the time, you've got to keep doing successions,
There's an actual genetic reason why people don't like it, certain regions, and I'm one of them. I can't stand the smell of it.
Okay, I understand that, and yet my brother-in-law despised it, right? And we had to keep it out of everything, right? But a couple times he was at a party or something, and we made a salsa that was really delicious. And we always would make a really strong one, and then just a little bit of it in there, And he started liking that, and then he married a Mexican woman. And he came back about, 5 years later. He didn't like arugula either. And we were feeding him, and he goes, where's the arugula and the cilantro? I said, you don't like it? We've been keeping it out. He said, I love it now. Well, I think it's actually got to do with eating small amounts and you having a reaction to it. Indeed, the first time, does anybody here know Joe Hollis? Joe Hollis is one of our treasures, mountain treasures, right? He has been an expert in so many things, And I gardened at his place in 78 or 79. I got there and he was like, you grow the vegetables, I'm growing the flowers. He was into alpines at the time. And then I asked about cilantro. He said, oh yeah, we got it here somewhere. I'm not much impressed with it, I'll find it for you. And he kept saying, I haven't found it yet, but I'll find it. And then he came and say, I got it. It was this really scraggy looking cilantro. And he said, here it is. I don't much like it. And I took a taste. I said, man, it almost tastes like there's olive oil in there. He said, I think it tastes like rancid fat. So it is clearly, a matter of taste.
Well, they say that people with a certain genetic, there's a gene involved that to them cilantro tastes like soap.
Right, yep. And I'm not one of those people, so I can't.
Does it have saponins in it?
I'd be surprised if it didn't. Lots of plants have saponins, And that's what that, carrots. Carrots, do you not like summer carrots?
Or summer carrots?
Carrots that have had a lot of heat in the summer?
Yeah, I can eat those.
Because they have a fair amount of saponins in them usually. Oh, right, okay, that's a different story. You cook cilantro, you won't even notice it. The people know that, right? Getting a little bit ahead on the cooking. I could take a bunch of cilantro, cook it up, and cook it for 10 minutes. She wouldn't even know it was in there probably.
That's maybe why I could eat it. One time I was here, there was a dish with cilantro, and I did not taste it.
Yeah, right. You cook it long enough and it disappears. It's like ramps, a bunch of things, like they talk about how strong ramps are, only if you're not cooking them. We're constantly trying to figure out how to cook them quick enough to not, and I talked to Mary, she says, I don't cook it at all. I just use them raw. I stir them in when I'm done cooking because they, some of those things, their flavor is so volatile that the heat just it's gone, Likewise, when I make salsa, if I want to have cilantro flavor in it, I've got to freeze some salsa. Freeze some cilantro and throw it in there when I open the jar up because I don't care how much I put in by the time I can it, it's not there, And I don't know what their trick is, but I can vaguely taste a teeny bit of cilantro in the stuff I buy that says cilantro tomato, but hardly. And they must be, getting essence of cilantro and putting it in there because it goes away really fast, Okay, if we have all those in, let's do a little look here. Is there anything I wish we got in that we didn't? Oh, let's do the salad Burnet. It's low growing. Where's a place that's close to a grassy spot, but wants some sun? Maybe back in that corner back there? Yeah. right there. Yeah.
So trying to get this established with what's been going on with all this heat and humidity, would you ever consider putting a low hoop over this with plastic, opened ends to shed the water?
I'm afraid that
You just trap the humidity, unfortunately.
exactly. You trap the humidity, and it'd probably be worse. And years ago, I tried covering a big section of the Highland Lake garden with plastic, so it'd be dry and I could work it in the springtime.
Yeah.
It was just as wet as the rest of the garden. The water's coming in, right? I mean, you know.
It all comes in from
Yeah, I mean, it's endless water, right? I mean, you got dry, what's it do? Sucks it up, you know? I don't think, you know, I guess maybe, you know, if you covered the whole garden, you know, then you might be able to get there, but yeah. But even our greenhouse, I mean, a lot of those beds on the edges anyways are still good and wet no matter what. They're totally covered, but they get good and wet. Okay, any questions about this process? All right, let's go take a real quick look at the attempts we had, and we can just leave this stuff here and I'll clean it up after. I was out here planting in the dark, and I love marjoram. It's probably my favorite herb, sweet marjoram. And I put it in, I'm gonna get that marjoram in, and I forgot that I had planted a tithonia at the end there, which I want tithonia always on the edges. I want to feed the beneficials. You can see it's suffering, right? And that's the moisture, I guarantee you. You know, it's not happy, but it'll keep flowering for us, you know. But insult to injury, not only is it too wet for the poor marjoram, but also it's got that, you know, western sun totally covering up, and it looks unhappy as could be. I mean, marjoram in good conditions, which really it should have been not there, but about here. But then again, there was Italian parsley right there, and it's gone. You know, this guy here, it's kind of okay, but I look at the bottom leaves and they're not happy, and the dianthus further down, not okay at all. You know, there were a bunch of parsleys here. I got one still alive. You know, this is probably, I did plant, I think that's further down there, I planted a Mexican tarragon. Remember I was telling you about Mexican tarragon? It looks a lot like that, but I think that's another dianthus, and that's pretty happy. But it's a little higher there, you see how it's starting to rise up? And then this has been in since the middle of June. It's one of the rosemaries that I started from seed. The right kind of year, that'd be a small bush by now, you know? But just not enough sun, too much rain. And by the way, once again, planting in the dark, one of these guys is moving. It'll probably be the Rebecca if this guy does well, because it's a lot easier to grow Rebecca. But I'll probably move that guy because it's too close to that as it gets bigger. And then this is a lavender, and it's still, you know, frankly, I think it looks pretty good, to tell you the truth. You know, it's not growing very fast. I expected it to grow faster, but it looks healthy. It looks healthier than the rosemary, you know. But not ideal. And then there's this compost pile, which we didn't plant. And then not an herb, but an interesting specimen plant. This is a Canna edulis. So it's a Canna Lily that you can actually eat the root. Apparently you want to cook it a lot if you don't want to have flatulence. It's got a lot of inulin in it. But if you cook it a lot, it's edible. And then next to it here, this is another dianthus. It's doing good. But in here I had planted sage, tarragon. The sage is a nice big one, and I can't even find it. It's completely gone. But then here, doing better, and definitely putting more growth on. It went in a little later. Stevia is doing fine, you know. It's making it fine. And then we get to here, and to be fair, I shouldn't have this. You know, I like to leave the buckwheat in, but it's a little close to the time. That might have been influencing it. But that time's been in since the middle of June. And it's okay, it's living, but it really should be a lot bigger, you know. Just not enough sun. And then like Shasta Daisy's doing fine. Right about here, they were already gone, or I would have kept it cleaned up, but this is where I'd put that mountain spinach in. And there's a dahlia. I got to come in here and open up the dahlia, but the dahlia's doing fine. It can handle it, you know. It went in later, it's smaller, but the echinacea, it's going to flower. It went in about the same time as the thyme, and they should be growing kind of similarly. This other dahlia here will probably be flowering real soon too. The zinnias can handle it. But along here, there were Italian parsley and more marjoram, and they're all just gone completely. And it's just getting wetter as we come down here. And the further we come down here, there's just less and less of the herbs that made it, you know. I put a pepper in when I put it in. I thought it was, by the label, it got mislabeled. I thought it was one of those habaneros that don't have heat. So that's why I went in an herb garden, because it was going to be a seasoning habanero. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother to put it in an herb garden. Here's the sage that lived, except for it's not living anymore. And I have to be, be honest. It should have had more air. This zinnia was, poorly placed. I should have actually put it, if it was there, it might be doing better. But none of them are doing very well outside this year anyway. So I think it would have been a matter of getting it to look good for this class, but it probably, if this weather keeps up, it still would have gone down, They just don't like it. And by the time you get here, there are dianthus, they're all wiping out. There were numerous other flowers that didn't make it down here. This Tithonia, actually, it's interesting. It's further down and it's doing better than the one up there, but it's not flowering as much. The more they flower, the more they suffer from that, Once again, I had basils in here. I tried several successions of basils, and they're gone. There are dianthus there that are gone. I know I'm forgetting some things that I had out here. More parsleys too. And we get all the way down to here, and this is a plant that likes the moisture, and it's looking great. It's an ancient vegetable called scarlet, and it's actually healthy looking as can be, and went in when the other ones did, and it's actually at the size it should be because it's designed to grow in wet, And it's a perennial. Next year we'll get to harvest finger-sized roots that taste something like between, I guess, a carrot and a parsnip.
How do you spell that?
Skirrit.
Which one is it?
Scarlet. It's this guy right here. It's what I like about it is that not only is it an unusual vegetable that can take wet, which we have lots of. By the time you get down here, we're really wet, but also it's an umbellifera, so it's I can see little tiny wasps feeding on it while I'm talking. So it's a yeah.
What's that purple plant down there?
The tall purple, that's called ironweed,
Ironweed?
and it likes wet metals.
Is it edible? Or?
No, it's not an edible at all. It's just it's a native ornamental, and it might have some medicinal. The Joe Pye weed, which it's often with, is named after an Indian medicine man. It's so medicinal. I don't know that ironweed does have medicinal, but we'll never not have it. We love it. It's gorgeous, and it obviously doesn't mind this weather at all. It does fine in this weather. So, anyways, this here there were big sages and big thymes and big oreganos, and they're all gone. But some of them are still doing okay, some of them less so. That dahlia there doesn't look as happy. And some stuff that I'm going to have to start over again that I was thrilled to have, I just got to do a much higher up in the garden, more open. It's interesting though, because the weather that I just heard predicted is that we're looking at 4 years of really hot weather. It's supposed to be that there's El Nino effects coming in, and that makes it hotter. And so then with the, global warming, which any farmer will tell you it's warming up for sure, combined with that, it's going to be warmer. So then maybe there won't be as much rain. Maybe it'll be drier. I'm not hoping for that. I don't want another year of breathing smoke, but that's how it is now. We're just like hedging our bets every which way. Okay, let's look at propagation.